Patrick had regained consciousness, but was afraid to move. He tried to control his breathing, not to give himself away. His face, too, it was necessary to control his expressions. There was no telling what his visitor might notice. A quivering lip, a wrinkle between the eyebrows, a convulsive exhalation. Though he was bandaged like a mummy, there was still risk. What the man couldn't control was his heartbeat and pulse, his heart submitting to the suffocating feeling of fear, persistently pounded out at Carter. Patrick was afraid of his wife. Of course, there are many jokes about husbands fearing their wives. However, Patrick's fright was of a different sort. He had recently learned that Melissa was the reason he had gotten into an accident and ended up on the operating table, and he also learned that Melissa didn't want to stop there. The blonde, tanned woman, dressed in designer clothes bought with Patrick's money, wanted to finish things off. That's what she was saying on the phone, not realizing her husband could hear her perfectly well. Normally, Melissa was more calculating, but the stress of the last few days had thrown her off balance, made her careless. The nurse, who had recently entered to check Patrick's condition, had convinced Melissa that the man would be out for a long time. He was given strong anesthetic drugs, the hospital employee had reported a while ago. They cause severe drowsiness, so your husband will sleep for 2 or 3 more hours. You can wait here or go down to the cafeteria. Melissa, theatrically sobbing, said she would stay by her husband's side. The voice of the unhappy wife contained so much sorrow that even an Oscar-winning director would have been impressed. The nurse left and Patrick began to come to his senses. He heard the conversation between the nurse and his wife as if through water. The drug injected into him was indeed strong. Patrick felt his brain engaged before his body could respond. He tried to move a finger or lift his eyelids to look at his wife, to calm her apparent sobbing, but he couldn't. He lacked the strength. Then Melissa got a phone call. The tears immediately subsided. She coughed, glanced at the hospital bed, then went to the window. She lowered her voice, but her words still reached Patrick's ears. "Why are you calling me? I told you I would sit in the hospital, to pretend that I'm suffering and beside myself with grief," the woman hissed. She must have let the caller speak because Melissa fell silent for a while. "Listen, Kirk," she mumbled, and the confused Patrick realized she was talking to his friend and colleague, Kirk Flanders. "You sort it out by yourself, okay? How do you plan to manage the company instead of Patrick if you falter at some small problem? And anyway, if they don't want to do business with us now, then screw them. We'll find other clients and other contracts." Patrick's temples were sweating. He could hardly refrain from clenching his fists. Terror, fear, anger, and incomprehension. All of this made his head spin like the solution in the drip, its catheter protruding from his arm. For a moment, Patrick thought he must still be asleep. Yes, he must not have come out of anesthesia, so he was hearing all sorts of nonsense. Conspiracy theories between Kirk and his wife. That couldn't be true, right? He wasn't living in a Brazilian soap opera. Kirk Flanders was his army buddy. He was a nice guy, but from a troubled family. His father was a terrible alcoholic. It had gotten to the point where he'd killed a drinking companion. At the trial, Kirk Sr. said that the deceased hadn't paid a gambling debt, for which he had paid with his life. Kirk didn't regret that his father was in prison now. On the contrary, he sighed with relief. His dad, whether sober or drunk, always flayed him. Kirk sincerely thought that life would now be easier and better, but he was wrong. Kirk's mother was devastated by her husband's incarceration. She ran to visit him, carried packages, and sent almost all the money she earned to treat her beloved prisoner. Then, during one of these visits, she met another convict. As they began to communicate, the woman's love for her husband faded. She demanded a divorce, which the state granted unilaterally. However, life in Kirk's house became even worse. A stepfather appeared who had served time for robbery, and along with him came his friends. None of them worked, yet money appeared in the house. Very soon Kirk realized his stepfather hadn't abandoned his criminal ways. The man kept eyeing his stepson, hinting that he and his buddies needed someone small and quick, for instance, to act as a lookout or to squeeze through narrow windows. However, Kirk wanted no part of such a life. After finishing school, Kirk couldn't get into any college. He worked odd jobs for a while, then waited until he was old enough for the draft and joined the army. There he met Patrick, whose bunk was next to his. Patrick had been much luckier in life. His parents were wonderful people who owned a pet store. As their only son, they raised him with love and moderate strictness. Patrick's father wanted to raise a decent good man. That's why he took on the role of disciplinarian when necessary. However, Patrick was never punished without reason. He wasn't even scolded for poor grades in school, except for skipping classes. "I don't need your grades," his father often told him. "Grades don't define you or show your knowledge. They're subjective. But I do need your effort, you know? School is the time when you have to search for yourself, to decide what you like and what doesn't appeal to you." Patrick listened to his father. He always respected him and was even a little afraid of him, though there was no need to be. The man never raised a hand to his son. He tried to talk things out. If Patrick misbehaved badly, he was punished with chores, not the belt. His mother, Mrs. Oliver, adored her son. She never even raised her voice at him, and often hid his misdeeds from her husband. Patrick was rarely denied anything. Of course, he wasn't allowed to get a snake tattoo on his entire arm at 13, nor was he permitted to go hitchhiking. However, all of Patrick's reasonable requests were warmly received by his parents, discussed, and only then did Mum and Dad decide. They especially encouraged their son's hobbies, which, as typical for school children, arose spontaneously and then faded away. During his love for rock music, Patrick tried to learn the guitar. His parents bought him a good instrument and paid for lessons with a teacher. When Patrick tired of music, he turned to boxing. His dad personally accompanied him to the sports equipment store and bought him a pair of gloves. However, after getting hit on the nose a few times, Patrick abandoned his dreams of becoming the next Muhammad Ali. Patrick also tried rock climbing, cycling, and swimming. His parents never grew weary of his pursuits. On the contrary, they encouraged their son, proud of any success he achieved. Finally, in 9th grade, Patrick settled on soccer. Though he wouldn't become a great athlete, Patrick enjoyed playing on the team. He was an excellent defender, and his parents tried not to miss any of his matches. As a result, Patrick grew into a good person and a grateful son. He sincerely loved his parents, helping them in the store both during his school years and after entering university. To a large extent, working in his parents' pet store shaped Patrick's life course, along with one more fateful incident. It was January, and winter had gone wild. The wind howled from morning till night, rattling people's windows and doors. Snowplows couldn't keep up with clearing the roads, and cars lost their battle against the elements. Hospital trauma units were filled with those who had slipped on the ice. Mrs. Oliver was among these unfortunate souls. She was walking from the store when her boots lost traction on a frozen puddle. The woman fell, hitting her head and arm. She felt pain in her arm immediately, but thought it was just a bruise. However, her hand began to swell rapidly. Seeing his wife's condition, Patrick's father quickly put her in the car to take her to the hospital. Patrick wanted to accompany his parents, worried about his mother, but his father explained there was no point. "There's no need for everyone to crowd the hospital," he told his son, "so please take care of the store. The goods will be delivered soon. You'll handle the receiving. Can I count on you?" Patrick nodded, sensing that his father's words carried more weight than a simple request to mind bags of pet food. It was the first time he was entrusting his son with his brainchild, his store. Patrick stayed at the store. The delivery went smoothly, and there were few customers. Then his dad called to say his mum had a cast but would be fine. The young man was frankly bored behind the counter when the door opened. Frosty air slipped in stealthily, as if it had been waiting for this moment, bringing a couple of snowflakes with it. Patrick watched the snowflakes settle on the mat and began to melt, evaporating. He then looked up at the visitor, forcing a polite smile. However, his smile faded faster than the snowflakes in the warm room. "Can you help me, please?" whispered a girl who looked slightly younger than Patrick. Her face was red from the frost that seemed to bite her cheeks and even her trembling lips, leaving dry wounds. The girl's blue bottomless eyes were full of tears. Her dark hair was dishevelled beneath a white hat with a fluffy pom-pom. "What happened?" Patrick asked, rushing out from behind the counter. "Here, I found it on the road," the girl said, looking down. Patrick followed her gaze and noticed she was hiding something under her down jacket. The girl slightly unzipped it, revealing a puppy nestled against her heart. "What's wrong with him?" "I don't know," the girl admitted. "Maybe he was run over. It's so icy today. There are so many accidents. And you can barely see the road. Maybe he's just cold or hungry, but he's breathing and warm. He needs help." A couple of tears escaped her eyes. Patrick clenched his fingers, suppressing a desperate desire to wipe them away. The girl was awakening strange emotions in the high school student. And this puppy. Patrick adored dogs. At home they had a mongrel with protruding ears and a stray cat that behaved like an insolent, arrogant aristocrat. His family had rescued both from the street. However, Patrick had never been involved in treating pets. "We have a pet store, not a veterinary clinic," Patrick replied regretfully, confused. The girl bit her chapped lip for a moment, causing one of the wounds to burst and bleed. Then she nodded. "Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I was just confused, and then I saw your store. I thought, maybe... I don't know where to take him." Patrick realized she was about to leave, but he didn't want to let her go. "Wait, I know where we can go. My father works with a clinic. I think they can help," he said hurriedly. "We've taken our pets there many times." When Patrick picked up the phone, he noticed hope flashing in the stranger's eyes. Warmth grew inside him, along with the desire to help both this wonderful girl and the puppy, whose nose was visible peeking out from her jacket. In the end, Patrick failed in his father's assignment. He closed the store early and ran off with a strange girl to save a dog. However, when Dad found out about it in the evening, he wasn't the least bit angry. He said that Patrick had made the right decision. The puppy was saved. Though hungry and with hypothermia, the vet promised it would live a long and happy life, if placed in good hands. Both Patrick and his new acquaintance were relieved by these words. Rhonda, the puppy's rescuer, was nearly in tears. She promised to take the puppy home personally. Patrick paid for the vet's appointment and the necessary medicines from his own pocket, much to Rhonda's embarrassment. They met again later when Rhonda went to the pet store to buy food for the puppy, along with bowls decorated with paw prints and a couple of toys. She kept the dog and named him Snowy. "When I first saw him, I thought he was a strange snowdrift," she admitted with a soft smile. They got to talking. Rhonda shared that she was in the 9th grade and wanted to become a doctor. "That day, when I found Snowy, it strengthened my desire to help people, and maybe even animals, if I have to. My grandfather was a doctor, and my grandmother was a nurse. They're both retired now, but they often discuss their work," she said. Then, looking at Patrick with her blue eyes, so beautiful and naive, she asked, "Are you finishing school soon? What do you plan to study?" Patrick didn't even think about his answer. Wanting to impress the girl he liked, he blurted out, "I plan to open a veterinary clinic." Rhonda's eyes widened, much to Patrick's delight, her mouth opening in a silent, "Oh." That was all Patrick needed. He cleared his throat, puffed out his chest, and stated confidently, "My parents own this store, so I'm destined to work with animals. However, I don't want to work here. I want to run a clinic for those who can't take care of themselves. I think we'll treat not only pets, but also help street animals. We'll provide treatment, organize charity events." Patrick became more animated as he spoke, seeing the admiration in Rhonda's eyes. In the end, Patrick spun such a tale that he began to believe it himself. He even discussed it with his parents, who, as usual, agreed with their son's plans after weighing the pros and cons. "It's a good idea," Dad nodded. "I'll talk to my friend who runs the veterinary clinic where you took the puppy. You can intern with him alongside your studies, and I have enough contacts to support you." Rhonda continued to visit the store for a while, then disappeared. Patrick hadn't thought to ask her for her phone number. However, he remained true to his word. That one rescued puppy and casual conversation with Rhonda had ignited a lively interest in him. He became passionate about the new idea, deciding to become a veterinarian and open his own clinic. Patrick entered university and then went straight into the army. He didn't want to dodge the draft, preferring to fulfill his duty to the motherland before pursuing his career. It was in the army that he met Kirk. Kirk Flanders was younger than Patrick Oliver, but they became close friends. Patrick noticed that no one came to Kirk's oath-taking ceremony, so he introduced him to his friends and family. Later, he often asked his mother, when she visited on weekends, to bring Kirk homemade pies and other treats. Mrs. Oliver was happy to oblige. She cared for Kirk, such a young and sweet boy. By the end of his military service, Kirk had become an integral part of the family. He became like a brother to Patrick and a son to his parents. But who could have known what their kindness would lead to? After the army, thanks to his father's support, connections and finances, Patrick quickly found his place. He opened a small clinic, and success soon followed. Before long, Patrick owned a network of popular animal clinics throughout the city and region. He even opened branches in rural areas, where they helped not only house cats and guard dogs, but also cows, horses, and other farm animals. Kirk, who had no formal education and had always been a wanderer, became Patrick's assistant. Patrick took Kirk under his wing, gave him a job at his office, and taught him everything from scratch. It must be said that Kirk did well, striving to justify his friend's trust. Everything seemed to be going well in their lives. However, the Trojans and Greeks also thought that everything was fine, until Helen from Sparta became the catalyst for war. So Melissa entered Patrick's life, turning everything in it upside down. She was a gorgeous woman who knew exactly what she wanted. Melissa exuded a frenzied energy. It was immediately clear she wouldn't be content keeping house, raising children, or cooking dinner. No, she was a different breed of woman. Yet Patrick managed to make Melissa's head spin. Patrick's parents weren't thrilled with their son's choice, but they held their tongues. At first, Patrick revelled in passionate nights with his sultry wife and the admiring glances directed at Melissa, but soon his rose-coloured glasses slipped off. A year after their wedding, their relationship began to deteriorate. The couple seemed to wake up and realise they spoke different languages. Both were at fault. Melissa had married Patrick for his money, while he had taken a beautiful shell, devoid of substance, as his wife. Now he had to deal with the consequences. Melissa, it turned out, was a handful. Before the wedding, she hadn't tried to get rid of Patrick's dog. But after getting Goal, she suddenly claimed a severe allergy. Poor Spike was relocated to Patrick's parents, leaving Patrick feeling like a traitor. Melissa, who had previously kept herself in check, now seemed to be off the leash. She constantly spent money, disappearing into beauty salons, stores and clubs. Patrick worked hard, helping his parents, as his father's health declined and his mother fell ill frequently. He tried to talk to his wife, but in vain. Finally, Patrick gave up. "Melissa, we're incompatible," he admitted. "I see family differently. I don't like your lifestyle or your views on marriage. To be honest, I want children, more than one. I'm sorry for wasting your time, but it would be better for us to separate now, before it's too late." Patrick hoped to resolve their conflict peacefully, but Melissa had no interest in peace. The temperamental woman was eager to create scandals, shouting and breaking dishes. Once, a cup even flew at Patrick's head, cutting his eyebrow. And now Patrick lay in the hospital ward, listening to her angry, stinging whispers, and wondered, was the moment she saw my first wound, noticed the first drop of my blood, a turning point? Was it then that she, like a shark, smelled blood and tasted her victim? It turned out that Melissa didn't want to part with the money she had access to, but she planned to keep it in a terrible way. What? Partners and doctors are waiting for Patrick's return? Melissa chuckled, as if Kirk had told her a great joke. They won't. Let them prepare funeral flowers. And you, be ready to give a farewell speech about how he was like a brother to you. And don't forget to ingratiate yourself with his parents afterward. They don't like me at all, but they adore you like family. It'll be easier for you to gain their trust. Patrick's breath caught, and his wife's voice continued to penetrate him like poisoned air. What? No, Patrick isn't awake yet. Yes, the operation went well, too well, she reported to her accomplice with feigned pity. If you had listened to me, everything would have turned out differently. We could have bribed the surgeon. Then Patrick simply wouldn't have made it out of the operating room. It would have been easy for him to cut something with his scalpel. Patrick opened his eyes. The light hurt, but he paid no attention. His gaze settled on his wife. She stood with one arm wrapped around herself, pressing a latest model smartphone to her ear, a gift from Patrick. Melissa constantly needed new things, always wanting to be among the first in their circle to show off to her friends. Designer handbag, shoes, phone, car. Who would have thought she'd want a new, young husband too? And not one as headstrong as Patrick, but obedient, like a doll. Melissa, as if feeling someone's gaze on her skin, turned around. Patrick managed to close his eyes, miraculously not clenching them. He held his breath and remained still, until Melissa continued her conversation. "What? Repeat," Melissa asked her interlocutor in a dissatisfied tone, turning back to the window. Kirk Flanders's words didn't seem to please her. She stomped her foot, shod in a scarlet shoe, then clicked her tongue. "What a coward you are! I have to do everything myself!" There was another pause as Melissa listened to her interlocutor. Then she sneered and let out a tirade, involuntarily speaking louder. "What? What did you do? You didn't do a damn thing. You didn't say a word. Thank you for that. And then you got drunk and started calling your buddy. Did you think I wouldn't find out? They gave me Patrick's cell phone. What did you want to tell him, huh? Why did you call him?" She snorted when she heard the answer. "I did it all, though. I put crushed pills in his morning coffee so he'd fall asleep at the wheel and get into that accident. And when it didn't kill him, I bribed the nurse. I did it all. You've done nothing for our future. And after this, you want to run the company and share a bed with me? Do you think I don't see anything? I can see right through you. You're as greedy and vile as I am. You've been jealous of Patrick your whole life. His relationship with his parents, his career, the fact that you saw me first and he took me for himself. Am I wrong? You've lived in his shadow, on the sidelines. You have nothing else to offer but good looks. Patrick's throat was already dry, but now it felt like the Sahara Desert. Could Kirk really harbour such thoughts? Impossible. Melissa was telling the truth. Kirk had introduced her to Patrick. However, Patrick never imagined there could be something between them. Kirk hadn't said a word. Everything is settled, Melissa mouthed meanwhile. I've already arranged it. Our patient will be injected during the nurse changeover. I won't be here, of course, to avoid suspicion. The report will say he collapsed due to post-operative complications. No, I can't take it anymore. If he regains consciousness, he'll either divorce me or have me arrested. Do you think he's that naive? Won't he remember the drink I gave him? And now he passed out afterward. I'm not risking my future. Keep your mouth shut, otherwise I'll drag you down with me. You'll end up where your father did. It's too late for remorse. Start taking what you can from life. Sometimes happiness comes at someone else's expense. Apparently, Melissa didn't wait for a response. She ended the call with an exaggerated sigh. What a weak fool, she muttered. As Melissa turned, her heels clicked a sharp rhythm across the room towards the door. Patrick remained motionless. At the exit, Melissa paused and glanced back over her shoulder with disgust. Her lips trembled, her mouth opening briefly, as if to speak or say goodbye. But she reconsidered, clenched her teeth and left the room, abandoning her husband. Patrick lay still for a while, afraid to move. Then he opened his eyes. He broke into a cold sweat and twitched violently. The realization was horrifying. Unlike in movies, where people immediately recover from surgery or coma, Patrick hadn't yet recuperated, and his condition was dire. His head throbbed. Nausea surged up his throat so forcefully that if it had anything in his stomach, he would have quickly emptied it. The room spun. He touched his forehead with trembling fingers. I've got to do something. I'll sue that witch. She wants her inheritance. Snake, Patrick whispered, feeling his strength ebbing away. It seemed to drain from him along with his energy. He yearned for sleep. He sank back into the pillow, trying to steady his breathing. Suddenly, the door swung open again. Patrick cast an anxious glance toward the entrance. His breathing came in gasps. A nurse had entered. A nurse who was going to give him an injection. The pretty nurse, noticing the patient's gaze, hesitated momentarily. Patrick interrupted her confusion as an admission of guilt. However, after a second, she smiled. Hello, how are you feeling? We've spoken before, but you were still under anaesthesia and probably don't remember. Her cheeks flushed slightly with embarrassment. Patrick furrowed his brow, unable to respond. Yes, he vaguely recalled something like that. As the anaesthesia wore off, he'd seen the girl. He thought she'd even held his hand. He remembered the warmth of someone else's touch, but assumed he'd imagined it. Are you feeling better? The nurse asked again, without waiting for an answer. I'll give you some injections, vitamins and painkillers. You need more rest now, and fluids. I can help you. Give you some water. The nurse was attractive, even beautiful. Her snow-white gown and upswept hair with a few loose strands made her look angelic. An angel of mercy. However, Patrick refused to trust appearances. Don't come near me, Patrick whispered. He tried to raise his hand but realized his limbs barely obeyed him. It was terrifying. "Excuse me?" The nurse froze obediently beside the IV drip, checking the solution level. "Don't you dare touch me. I know everything. You're all going to jail, understand?" He licked his dry lips. "You? How much did she pay you for my life? How much? I want you to know it's all my money. I could offer you more, but I won't. I'll send you all where you deserve to go." The nurse's eyes widened. Somewhere in the recesses of Patrick's mind, a faint recognition of those eyes flickered, but the spark was instantly extinguished. He couldn't think rationally. "Please calm down. I think you're experiencing post-operative psychosis. Your mind is confused. You can't distinguish reality from illusion." "I can do anything." "Let me check your temperature. You must have a fever." Patrick jerked away from the nurse's hand so violently that the catheter tore from his skin, causing pain. However, he barely noticed, nearly falling off the bed. "What are you doing? If you hurt yourself, the doctor will have my head," the nurse cried fearfully. She tried to catch Patrick, but he fought back. Realizing he couldn't overpower even a slight girl, the man gathered air in his lungs and began to call for help. "Her!" With a squeak, the nurse covered his mouth with her hand. Patrick tried to mumble against her warm palm. He noticed that the girl smelled pleasantly of mint. The thought struck him as insane. He was about to be killed, yet he was sniffing the hand of a criminal. "Please, please don't scream," the nurse suddenly wailed. "I can't lose my job. I've got a stack of reprimands. If I printed them all out, I could wallpaper my apartment with them. If I lose my job, they'll take away custody of my brother. I'm begging you." Her face was so close that Patrick could count each curved eyelash. The girl's whispered voice brushed against his skin. "I beg you, don't scream. I'll do my job, and then I'll get the doctor myself. But let's bring you back to normal." Patrick was dumbfounded. Her eyes, the colour of a mountain river, pleaded with him for help. He, already deprived of strength, was completely confused. Noticing that Patrick was no longer attempting to escape from the bed, the nurse carefully removed her fingers from his lips. "I need to help you. Give you an injection." "No!" Patrick shouted hoarsely. "No! I know what you want to do." Patrick felt sick again. He was ready to panic, to go off the rails, to go mad. The nurse tried desperately to calm him down, while simultaneously glancing at the door, as if someone would come in. This behaviour made Patrick even more suspicious. Then something unimaginable happened. The girl's eyes sparkled. She grabbed the syringe, and with one sharp movement, she injected herself. Then exhaled, blowing the longest strand from her face. "Vitamins," she muttered. "There are just vitamins in here." Patrick was shocked. He looked back and forth between the nurse and the syringe in her hands. "Quite convincing and also demonstrative," he whispered. She shook her head and sat down on the edge of the bed. "I don't get paid enough to put up with all this," she whispered softly, but Patrick heard. Patrick felt ashamed. Looking at her hunched figure, he felt the need to explain the reason for his hysteria, but his tongue wouldn't cooperate. And could he trust her? Then she straightened up and looked at him over her shoulder. More hair broke free from the bun, framing her pale face. With huge lake eyes filled with clear water, Patrick looked at her, realizing he wanted to catch something important eluding him. But what? And then it hit him. "Rhonda," the man exhaled. The nurse's lips trembled. She squinted for a moment. "Yes," she whispered, smiling weakly. "Do we know each other?" Patrick knew his face was hidden by bandages. No wonder she didn't recognize him. And how many years had it been? "Rhonda, it's me, Patrick, remember? The puppy, Snowy." With excitement, he tried to sit up again, but groaned, feeling the pain in his ribs. Rhonda fussed and helped him lie down. Her hands slid over the patient's shoulders. Fear and suspicion evaporated. Patrick exhaled, relaxed, his heart returning to its normal rhythm. He knew Rhonda wouldn't hurt him. He just knew it for sure. "Patrick, it can't be you," she gasped. The man smiled weakly, feeling that he was losing consciousness again. "Rhonda, don't go," he begged. "Don't go, please. I haven't lost my mind. I heard a conversation between my wife and my friend, almost my brother. I'm a dead man, you know, if—" Patrick lost consciousness, but the last thing he heard was Rhonda's promise to take care of him. He believed her. There was no one else to believe in anyway, and a man needs hope. Patrick woke up when sunlight was streaming through the window of the ward, flooding the floor with light, touching the walls and everything it could reach. The man wrinkled his nose, then groaned. He was alive. Either his execution had been postponed, or— Patrick, noticing something strange, turned his head. Rhonda was asleep in the chair. An open book lay on her lap. "Rhonda," called the man hoarsely. "Rhonda!" She jumped up from her seat, the book falling from her lap. "Dmitri Yuryevich, I wasn't sleeping on duty. I was just resting my eyes, thinking," she muttered, looking around for the head doctor. Then Rhonda found Patrick's face with a cloudy gaze. "Phew!" She rubbed her face with her palms. "Thank God! I thought I was caught again." The woman collapsed back into the chair. Patrick kept looking at her, afraid to even blink. "Did you spend the night here?" Rhonda nodded, taking her palms away from her face, yawning. "What was I supposed to do? You were saying some scary things. You were already falling asleep, but you mumbled something about poison, injections, doctors. Honestly, I'm not sure if you're not talking nonsense, Patrick. However, if I had just left, I wouldn't have been able to sleep well tonight." Then Rhonda got up and began to check the man's health. "The doctor hasn't made his rounds yet, but I'm sure everything is fine," she said. "Rhonda, where did you disappear to?" Patrick couldn't help but ask. Yes, now he had much more serious problems. However, the question had been nagging at him since his youth. Rhonda paused, then began her story. Her voice was devoid of emotion, as if she had grown too accustomed to recounting it. "My parents died. My aunt took me, my brother, and the puppy. Dad's sister. She never liked my father, though. She thought his parents loved him more and was jealous. I don't even know why she came for us if she didn't want us." Rhonda bit her lip, and Patrick realized this habit must have stemmed from her childhood. Tyler was only 2 years old then. I was older. My aunt tried to bully me, but I wouldn't let her. So she switched to the weaker ones, Tyler and Snowy. Snowy got it first. I came back from kindergarten with Tyler and the puppy was gone. My aunt said he'd run away, but she grinned. She had thrown him out herself. We never found Snowy, even though we put up notices all over the neighborhood. Rhonda paused for a moment, then continued. I had to finish high school, but college and medical school were out of the question. My grades dropped terribly after losing my parents, and I could only think about my brother, not about biology or chemistry. Did your aunt hurt Tyler? Patrick asked. Rhonda sighed. Once, I didn't have an opportunity to pick him up from kindergarten. I arrived late. He was upset. I asked my aunt if I could go get him. The kindergarten was just steps from the house. She glared at me and said if she went after him, he might get lost like Snowy. I was terrified then, more scared than I'd ever been. Even at my parents' funeral, she let out a shaky breath. Patrick wanted to hug her, but didn't dare. In the end, I went to nursing courses. not wanting to give up on working in a hospital. I realized I'd never become a doctor. Then I started working part-time. I was a nanny at Tyler's kindergarten, and when he went to school I quit. I changed jobs and got custody of my brother from my aunt. She was furious because she'd been getting money for us, but the court sided with me after hearing what Tyler said. I promised my aunt I'd ruin her if she didn't give me my brother. Tyler and I have been together ever since, but there are often difficulties. Soon we'll have another inspection, which is why I was afraid of being fired at the wrong moment. Our head doctor can't stand me, to be honest. I'm thinking of quitting, but later. Rhonda shared a bit more about her life with Patrick. The man felt immense sympathy for this brave young woman. She kept quiet about the real reason the chief doctor disliked her. She had refused his advances for a secret relationship. He was married, but had a weakness for young, beautiful nurses. Rhonda had rebuked him rudely, not wanting to be anyone's mistress. The doctor hadn't forgiven that, and kept a close eye on her, constantly threatening dismissal. Patrick also shared his own story. He briefly relayed to Rhonda the conversation he had overheard between his wife and another person. Rhonda was stunned. "We should go to the police," she said. "Yes, probably, but what if they think I'm just paranoid like you did at first? Some people have visions of aliens after anesthesia. I see a conspiracy." Rhonda thought for a moment, looking at the bandages hiding Patrick's face. "Then we'll just bring them out in the open," she said, as an idea formed in her mind. Later that evening, 2 people entered Patrick's room, where he lay sleeping peacefully. Kirk and Melissa glanced at each other, listening to the silence. "I wonder why the hell he called us here at the same time," Melissa muttered, closing the door behind them. Kirk looked troubled. He avoided his friend's gaze. Melissa clicked her tongue. "Don't look so grim. This isn't a funeral. Yet." Kirk shuddered. "He's already regained consciousness. Be quiet," Kirk muttered. Melissa pushed her hair back from her shoulders and walked to the bed, casting a glance at her husband. The room was bathed in cosy twilight. "When will it happen?" Kirk asked quietly. "You said that—" "Yes, I did, but there's a nurse around him, and he regained consciousness too quickly," Melissa muttered disappointedly. "Who did you bribe?" Kirk pressed. Melissa was clever and cunning. However, she underestimated people, especially those she considered insignificant. That's what she thought of Kirk. She believed he was in love with her and ready to worship the ground she walked on. Not noticing the trap in his questioning, she revealed a name. "The chief doctor, but I only gave part of the payment. I'm not an idiot. I promised the rest when I get my fortune as a grieving widow." Kirk nodded, shoving his hands into his jeans pockets and regarding Melissa with a lifeless look. "Don't you feel sorry for Patrick at all?" Melissa shrugged. "I only feel sorry for myself in this world, and he's to blame. He shouldn't have threatened me with divorce. People like me, you leave only feet first," she grinned. "This applies to you too, Kirk." Kirk shivered, then asked again, "Don't you want to say goodbye to him?" "What would I say? And why bother? We'll all meet in hell," the woman snorted. Kirk shook his head, a shadow of a smile on his lips. "I don't think so, Melissa. You don't know Patrick well, even though you were his wife. Such a man isn't destined for where you're headed." Melissa exploded. She leapt at Kirk, shaking him and hissing in his face. "Pull yourself together! What's with the sentimentality? You feel sorry for him now, don't you? Didn't you say you were suffocating with envy?" "I was drunk, and you kept pouring drinks, then dragged me to bed," Kirk muttered. Indeed, Melissa had already sunk her claws into him long ago. She'd recorded Kirk's drunken ramblings on her phone, threatening to use them as evidence of his motive for the crime in court. "What's in a sober man's mind is on a drunk man's tongue," Melissa retorted. "I repeat, we're in this together. We'll answer for everything together, okay? At the trial, I'll say it was your idea, that you seduced and manipulated me. They'll believe me, not you. After all, I'm the best liar in the world." Kirk looked into her eyes. "You're right. We will answer together. Except I've already resigned myself to paying for my actions. Have you?" Melissa frowned, noticing the change in his look and tone. Before she could answer, Patrick rose from the bed. Realizing she'd been caught, Melissa squealed and pushed Kirk away. Instead of running for the door, she grabbed the nearest object, scissors, and raised them over Patrick. He deftly ducked under her arm, pushing her aside. As the bandages fell away, Melissa realized it wasn't Patrick. It was a police officer. "Damn you! How could you betray me?" Melissa yelled at Kirk as they led her away. "See you in hell." He waved goodbye. The trial concluded swiftly. Melissa received a long sentence, trading designer dresses for prison uniforms and a new, less flattering haircut. Kirk confessed. It emerged that Patrick had called him the day before, inviting him to the ward. Kirk had immediately come clean, repenting on his knees and even crying. In the end, he was offered a plea deal, which Kirk accepted, resulting in a lighter sentence. Patrick wasn't sure if he could revive their friendship or trust Kirk again. He understood that Kirk had been a broken man since childhood, struggling to trust others. Yet the pain of betrayal still haunted him. Patrick and Rhonda began a relationship. Patrick befriended the now grown-up Tyler, becoming not a father figure, but a kind friend and older brother. Patrick's parents adored their son's girlfriend, welcoming both Rhonda and Tyler into the family with open arms. A year later, Patrick and Rhonda married. Shortly after the wedding, the young wife discovered she was expecting a child. Looking to the future, we can say with certainty that they would live a long and happy life. And how can it be otherwise? After all, as it turned out, you can't run from fate.